The older woman and beautiful nurse, forbidden love at the clinic, the fluorescent lights of St. Mary's Medical Clinic flickered overhead as Margaret Hayes sat in the waiting room, her trembling hands clutching a manila envelope that contained results she wasn't ready to face. At 62 years old, she had buried a husband, raised 3 children who now lived scattered across the country, and convinced herself that the remaining chapters of her life would be written in solitude. She had no idea that on this ordinary Tuesday morning, everything she thought she knew about herself, about love, about the possibility of feeling alive again, would begin to unravel the moment a young nurse with kind eyes called her name. Sophia Chen moved through the clinic's sterile hallways like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. At 28, she possessed a gentle strength that made patients feel safe, a quality that came not from her nursing degree but from something deeper, something inherent in the way she truly saw people when others merely looked through them. When she smiled at Margaret and gestured toward the examination room, neither woman could have predicted that this routine appointment would become the first page of a story that would test everything they believed about themselves, about society's expectations, and about the courage it takes to reach for happiness when the world insists you have no right to it. The examination was supposed to be brief. Margaret's blood pressure reading, a discussion about her chronic insomnia and the grief that still woke her at 3 a.m, 2 years after losing Robert. But Sophia didn't rush. She didn't offer the practiced condolences that Margaret had grown to despise, those empty words that people spoke because they didn't know what else to say. Instead, Sophia listened, really listened. She asked about the small details, what Robert's favorite meal had been, how Margaret spent her evenings now, whether anyone checked in on her regularly. And in that small, sterile room that smelled of antiseptic and false cheerfulness, Margaret felt something she hadn't experienced in years. She felt seen. The appointments became regular. Margaret found reasons to return, a persistent cough that wouldn't leave, questions about new medications, concerns about vitamins and supplements. Dr. Patterson, her primary physician, remained oblivious, but Sophia understood. She recognized the loneliness that drove Margaret back through those clinic doors, because she carried her own version of it. Sophia's family had immigrated from Taiwan with dreams of traditional success, and those dreams included a respectable husband, grandchildren, a life that followed the script they had sacrificed everything to make possible. They didn't include the truth that Sophia had known about herself since adolescence, the truth she had buried beneath academic achievements and professional dedication, the truth that made her parents' dreams feel like a prison she could never escape. Their conversations grew longer. Sophia would linger after checking Margaret's vitals, and they would talk about art, about the books they were reading, about the small cruelties of growing older in a world obsessed with youth, or the specific isolation of living, a life that belonged more to other people's expectations than to oneself. Margaret found herself thinking about Sophia at strange moments, while making coffee in her too-quiet kitchen, while pretending to watch television shows she couldn't follow, while lying awake in the darkness wondering when exactly her life had become this echo of itself. She told herself it was simply gratitude for finding a friend, for discovering someone who didn't treat her like she was invisible. She told herself the quickening of her pulse when she saw Sophia was just appreciation. Nothing more complicated than that. But bodies don't lie, and hearts recognize truth even when minds refuse to acknowledge it. The moment everything shifted happened on a rainy afternoon in late October. Margaret had arrived at the clinic drenched, having forgotten her umbrella, and Sophia had brought her a towel and a cup of tea from the break room. Their fingers touched as Margaret took the warm mug, and the contact lasted perhaps 2 seconds longer than necessary. Neither woman pulled away. They simply stood there, frozen in that charged space between what was and what could be, both terrified and exhilarated by the electricity that passed between them. Sophia's eyes widened with recognition and fear. Margaret felt her carefully constructed defenses crumble, and in that moment they both knew that everything had changed, that there was no going back to the comfortable pretense of simple friendship. The weeks that followed were agony. They circled around the truth, both desperate to speak it and terrified of what would happen if they did. Margaret wrestled with confusion that felt like betrayal, betrayal of Robert's memory, betrayal of the life she had lived, betrayal of the woman she thought she was. She had loved her husband. Their marriage had been good, comfortable, real. How could she suddenly feel this way about someone else? About a woman, about someone young enough to be her daughter? The shame was suffocating. She stopped sleeping entirely, stopped eating properly, lost weight that her friends attributed to grief, but that came from a different kind of anguish altogether. Sophia struggled differently, but no less painfully. She had known she was attracted to women since high school, but she had never acted on it, had never allowed herself to even imagine a future where she could love openly. Her parents' expectations weighed on her like stones. Every Sunday dinner became an ordeal of questions about why she wasn't dating, suggestions of suitable young men from their community, gentle pressure that felt anything but gentle, and now, impossibly, she had developed feelings for a patient. For a woman more than 3 decades her senior, for someone whose life experience and loss made Sophia feel simultaneously drawn and inadequate. The professional ethics alone should have been enough to stop this. But the heart doesn't consult rulebooks before it breaks open. The breaking point came in December. Margaret had scheduled an appointment, but when Sophia called her into the examination room, she found Margaret in tears. The loneliness had become unbearable, the pretending exhausting. Margaret confessed everything, the sleepless nights, the confusion, the feelings she didn't understand and couldn't control. She apologized repeatedly, certain she was making Sophia uncomfortable, certain she had ruined the one meaningful connection she had found in years. But Sophia didn't step back. Instead, she closed the examination room door, sat down beside Margaret and took her hand. And then, in a voice barely above a whisper, Sophia spoke her own truth. She told Margaret about the years of hiding, about the weight of unmet expectations, about the loneliness of living a life that looked acceptable to everyone, except the person living it. She confessed that she thought about Margaret constantly, that she had never felt this way about anyone, that she was terrified and exhilarated and had no idea what to do with feelings that society insisted were wrong for every possible reason. They didn't kiss that day. They simply held hands and cried and acknowledged the impossible situation they found themselves in. The age difference alone would spark judgment and cruel whispers. The professional relationship made things complicated. The fact that they were both women added another layer of complexity in a small community where acceptance was more theoretical than practiced. Margaret's children would be horrified. Sophia's parents would be devastated. The reasonable thing, the safe thing, would be to end this before it truly began, to protect themselves from the pain and judgment that would inevitably come. But love, real love, isn't reasonable. It doesn't calculate risks or weigh consequences. It simply exists, insistent and undeniable, asking only whether you're brave enough to honor it. Over the following weeks, they saw each other outside the clinic. Coffee at a cafe 2 towns over where no one knew them. A walk through a nature preserve on a weekday afternoon when they should have been elsewhere. Conversations that lasted hours and revealed layers of themselves they had never shown anyone. Margaret learned about Sophia's dreams of traveling, her love of watercolor painting, her secret hope of someday working with international medical relief organizations. Sophia discovered that Margaret had wanted to be a writer in her youth, that she still filled notebooks with observations and half-written stories, that beneath the conventional, suburban existence she had lived was a woman who had always felt slightly out of step with the world around her. The first time they kissed was in Margaret's car, parked outside Sophia's apartment building on a January evening. It was tentative and terrifying and perfect. Margaret felt like she was 20 again, discovering something entirely new while simultaneously recognizing something she had, perhaps always known but never allowed herself to name. Sophia felt like she was finally, fully herself for the first time in her life. They were both shaking when they pulled apart, both crying and laughing, both aware that they had just stepped across a threshold from which there was no return. The reality of their situation couldn't be ignored forever. They kept their relationship hidden, meeting in careful privacy, building a secret life that felt both precious and painful. Margaret had never been good at deception, and the weight of hiding from her children began to eat at her. Sophia found herself avoiding her parents' phone calls, unable to face their questions about her life. while keeping such a significant truth from them. The secrecy felt like a betrayal of what they shared, an implicit agreement that their love was something shameful rather than something beautiful. The decision to live openly came slowly and then all at once. Margaret's daughter made a surprise visit one weekend and found evidence of Sophia's presence: coffee mug that wasn't Margaret's style, a book Margaret wouldn't have chosen, small details that didn't add up. When confronted, Margaret could have lied. She could have deflected or minimized or protected herself from her daughter's reaction. Instead, she told the truth. She explained that she had met someone who made her feel alive again, who brought joy and meaning back into her days, who had helped her rediscover parts of herself she thought she had lost when Robert died. And when her daughter asked who this person was, Margaret took a breath and said Sophia's name. If this story has touched your heart, if you've ever felt the courage it takes to live your truth, despite the world's expectations, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Your support means everything and helps stories like these reach people who need them most. The conversation that followed wasn't easy. Margaret's daughter struggled with confusion, concern, and her own preconceptions about what was appropriate or normal. But she also saw something undeniable in her mother's face, a lightness that had been absent for years, a spark of genuine happiness that couldn't be faked. Over the following weeks, through difficult conversations and gradual acceptance, Margaret's children came to understand that their mother's relationship with Sophia wasn't a crisis or a phase, but rather a genuine love that deserved respect and support. Sophia's path was harder. When she finally told her parents about Margaret, their reaction was everything she had feared: disappointment, anger, confusion, and a deep sense that Sophia was throwing away the life they had built for her. The rift felt unbearable, and there were dark weeks when Sophia questioned whether any relationship, no matter how profound, was worth losing her family. But Margaret stood beside her through it all, patient and steady, never pressuring but always present, showing Sophia what it meant to be loved unconditionally. Months passed. Some of Margaret's friends drifted away, uncomfortable with a situation they couldn't understand or accept. Some of Sophia's colleagues at the clinic whispered, though Sophia had carefully ended her professional relationship with Margaret to maintain ethical boundaries, but others surprised them. Margaret's youngest son flew across the country to meet Sophia and told his mother he had never seen her so happy. Some of Sophia's nursing colleagues became fierce allies, defending the relationship against judgment and gossip. And slowly, painfully, some of Sophia's family members began to soften, to see that their daughter's happiness mattered more than their expectations. Before we reach the ending, I want to ask you something special. Please take a moment to comment below and tell me, what does it mean to you to choose love over fear? Your words might inspire someone else who's struggling with a similar choice. Today, Margaret and Sophia share a small house filled with light and laughter, and the quiet contentment of two people who found each other against all odds. Margaret has started writing again, her stories filled with characters who refuse to accept the limitations others place on them. Sophia has returned to her art, her watercolors bright and bold in ways they never were when she lived in hiding. They have built a life together that honors both of their journeys. Margaret's years of conventional happiness and profound loss, Sophia's struggle to reconcile her heritage with her authentic self. Their love story isn't conventional, and the path they chose wasn't easy. But standing together in their garden on quiet evenings, watching the sun set while sharing the small details of their days, they both know they made the right choice. Because love, real love, isn't about following society's script or meeting others' expectations. It's about recognizing the person who sees you completely, who accepts every complicated truth about who you are, and who makes you brave enough to claim the life you deserve. And in the end, that kind of love is worth every difficult conversation, every moment of fear, every sacrifice required to protect it. It's worth everything.